Rules of the pool. Those who don't know anything don't want you to either. A lot they have to worry about, right? Note, no lifeguard on duty after 10 p.m. As he rubbed himself briskly with a warm, dry towel, one bather remarked, and to make my point, if I may be so bold as to paraphrase life, and suddenly life raised its head out of the water and said, be my guest. I do it all the time myself. After summer fire sale, a man who can ramble on. The juice that runs the sun runs your mind, unless you let yourself grow cold and get old. Definition: an intellectual adult. A kid dressed up in the clothes of his parents, who are nudists. Another distinction between man and the other local creatures. You can survive or you can thrive. One is physical, the other something more. From our Rest Assured files, if you tell what kind of guy you are, rest assured you will whine. At certain times, to have extraordinary fun, this one man would let his mind run completely wild. See, he was a mystic and he knew how to do it. Faith and the Spirit of Man, a poem. Everyone's filled with belief, everyone's full of shit. A man with a script has dew on his shoe. After being presented with yet another personal inquiry, one man turned to life and said, I'm going to tell you one more time, I don't do questions. And life said, hey, don't tell me, tell your mind. And the man replied, that's what I'm doing. Why the world needs super idiots to criticize the ordinary ones. The monk looks for help within, the ordinary look for help without, a real mystic looks everywhere. Being weird is just one of the many hobbies available to humans. Being serious is another. The wind told the water, as long as you're still talking, you don't really know. And the water replied, you're a fine one to talk. And the wind replied, well, thank you. One man thought, so long as my nervous system is in reasonably good shape, why should I pay utility bills? Showbiz Insider's News. Everything great that man will ever say on this planet has already been pre-recorded. Quite unexpectedly, one chap began to periodically picture his mind as being a voiceover to his consciousness. To be alive is to be a fish in a net holding all, a net that is life-sustaining. A mystic wants out without destroying himself in the process. A fellow fumes. If you consider the matter that language and civilization are inseparable, and then look at man as being divided into three levels of civility, the most civilized, the least civilized, and the vast majority who are somewhere in the middle, it is the two extreme groups who take words most seriously. What the hell gives? In fact, I wouldn't even be shopping here had it not been for those money-saving coupons in the paper. From our perforce files. If you make life out to be more important than is warranted, you will perforce do so regarding all of its many subsets. Here is a sampling from our survey wherein people were asked to give their comments on the subject of relationships. It's a list of just excerpts. Human relationships are man's most difficult challenge. Relationships cannot survive lies and deception. A relationship of love can only grow from a basis of respect. A wrong relationship can drown both parties. Only real adults can have mature relationships. And finally, this response from one of those polled. Relationships are easy. Now the tango, now that's difficult. Life can be anything you can think it to be, such as God, nature, fate, the unknown, etc., since it is life thinking such things through you. A mind that actually knows something, a definition. A gopher hole that pulled itself down inside. From yet another child, yet another annoying question. Here's the question. Why do even the more educated and sophisticated of men continue to have an inordinate interest in the ill and aberrant among them? Hey, are you sure that's a kid, not just some short person from another planet? Since tomorrow's not sick, today's health is irrelevant. A man who can think between the sound of the words is already traveling in space. Turning the mythical into the literal helps the ordinary ease their anxiety. And of your rights. In that last item, shouldn't it be in the plural? Anxieties? Artunk. There are many symptoms, but only one anxiety. Hierarchy, code UI 407D. Being ordinary is taking life seriously. Mysticism is in taking the proper things seriously. Super mysticism is in taking nothing seriously. File closed, deaccessed, XX299. A man stopped to ponder, with you on the bottom of your shoe, just how much worse can you do? From our if files. If you don't pick on the weak wolves and the feeble minds, neither are likely to stick around. In case of capture, everyone has a poison pill they can swallow. It's known as you. Don't lose your place like I do. And after a god-awful, you didn't lose your place. In case of capture, everyone has a poison pill they can swallow. It's known as you. After a god-awful, though minimally necessary passage of time, a viewer says, I've just repeated that to myself. In case of capture, everyone has a poison pill they can swallow, and it's known as you. Now, am I supposed to assume that by the word capture, you refer to some sort of intellectual imprisonment, and swallowing a poison pill of yourself, alluding to overcoming your own genetic nature? Hey, viewer, assume this. Law of planet Earth. Men with little small brains ask a lot of dumb questions. An additional law. Men with even smaller brains attempt to answer them. Well, hey, good looking. Are you from around here? Then somewhere in here should have been, then a man stopped to ponder, with you on the bottom of your shoe, just how much worse can you do? No. And in response to the many, many requests we've received, we will now repeat an earlier item. One with the specific side potential of greatly annoying the sane, civilized, and decent among our viewing audience. Since tomorrow is not sick, today's health is irrelevant. Another tip from our New Intelligence's Efficiency Handbook. You cannot properly identify the dumb, the regressive, and the simple-minded without a field guide, a compass, and a mirror. And even then, by God, it's iffy. Some city legislative business. Proposal. Anyone who actually knows anything should be run out of town. Drawback. They wouldn't care. A personal possibility. If you can't think good, think brief. Found in a crushed fortune cookie. A man who's not a hermit ain't fit company. The inside scoop. Listen. Everybody wants to be happy and relaxed. It's just that a mystic wants it in a, well, unconventional form. Local conditions told one guy, "Hey man, I wish you wouldn't ask me all those dumb questions when my mouth's full." And the guy said, "But your mouth's always full." And conditions replied, "Yeah, so?" From our "you're not" files. You're not worthy of respect if it matters to you whether others respect you or not. It's easy enough to call ordinary people idiots once you understand within yourself what being ordinary is. Yeah. Your literature in action. All satire is social criticism. All social criticism, excessive amounts of hog sweat. Yeah. Tune in next time when we will take up the question of just what is excessive amounts. A man on a cellular brain called and asked, "Would you please repeat that item you read last week which said that from a mystic's view, if at first you don't succeed, you tried the wrong thing?" "I'm sorry, sir, we don't do repeats around here." A new neighbor's definition. Pretension. The mind's welcome wagon. You could picture man's post-survival economic world as not running on credit, as is often said, but rather on a sham sense of urgency. After the leader of one world, or country, or city, or mind, well, anyway, after him they named a river, but I can't tell you the name of it on the air. FCC regulations, you know. At running ground level, behind their backs, all alpha wolves are known to be insensitive, uncultured, no-talent blockheads. But this is strictly behind their backs. Because actually hearing this kind of thing can distract a no-talent, uncultured, minimum wage security guard from his duties. A man who happens to know the truth about life doesn't waste his time on things that are a waste of his time. When it was almost 4 o'clock, one man turned to himself and said, "Do you realize it's almost," I forget it, an expression of ordinary men's views of worry, concern, and seriousness. Quoting now, "If life hadn't wanted you to itch, it wouldn't have, if life hadn't wanted man to itch, it wouldn't have given him poison ivy." From our butt files. 'Tis said that everyone has a sense of destiny, but some only experience it 2 seconds before death. One man said, "There's only 2 things I won't talk about, myself and other people." Life speaks a brief message. Although in the larger picture, no one's responsible for what they are, yet somehow, a mystic's got to be. Analyzation, the process, one man's view. It's easier to think about other people if you don't do it in person. Yet another brilliant, yes, brilliant, offering and clearly explaining what this kind of unusual activity is actually all about in 36, 6 words or less. Those pursuing the mystical way are attempting to nail life's hide to the door before it does it to them. One man's heartening account. Though physically we're all different sizes and shapes, intellectually we're all equal. No one knows what the hell is going on. Insider's fashion secret. Remember, a mystic in a mystic's garb is a frog uncertain if he has a sufficient number of warts. Fact, if you talk about anything long enough, you'll get sick of it. Fact, oneself is the exception. Mythology update. The knights you've heard of ride off on horses to slay dragons, while the real ones you've never heard of ride off on dragons. Viewer's advisory. If you think this has anything to do with your own neural processes, you had best get your mind reshoot as quickly as possible. from your friends. Friends, yes, so-called friends, here at New Intelligence, yet another gigantically profitable time-saving tip. No ordinary person ever intended that you should take what they said seriously. Now, don't you feel the dumb goose? God, even I don't like that one. Get that off the tape. You don't really know anything until you know everything that everyone else knows. Mysticism, this world's longest lasting fad. One way you might tell that you're doing this thing right is that you can see anything in life as an allegory. Another way is that you can look at anything in life and not see it as an allegory. Now, going back out and chase some ducks. Oh, a quickie health tip. If you're not sure of the difference between your mind and a pimple, keep your hands away from your face. Quack, quack. Only a true individual can start his own fad. And even then, he's got to keep it mostly to himself. Ideas with no audience is mysticism at its finest. An imaginary mystic's economic position: never buy anything that's advertised or for sale. And the viewer writes, are you sure that those last two can fit together? Hey, what do you people out there think the limitations of mysticism are anyway? If there was such a thing as last time, then last time we were mentioning some of the aspects of seriousness and entertainment, if you recall. And what we didn't get around to was an item from last time that said that when it's done correctly, a humorist, to make it a person instead of humor, that a humorist would act as a physician engaged in healing. Of course, that's a goddamn trick item if done correctly. But at any rate, tied to the idea of seriousness, tied to the idea of what it takes for someone to be able to hear something extraordinary, and also tied to the sense of urgency, which, unless we just drop it completely, is all tied up to that which is presented as entertainment, or that which people hear as entertainment, and that which people hear as being serious info, enlightenment, revealed ideas, etc. Whether they hear it as being entertainment or seriousness, and a whole bunch of combinations, and you need to know enough about Newman to take the game theory and work it out yourself and realize that there are whatever is involved was Newman's game theory. Yeah. Done correctly, humor acts as a physician engaged in the art of healing. In any instance, humor can be seen in two different ways. If we had a convention of meteorologists, and a speaker gets up and he makes this little comment. He says, you know why God made economists? So that we wouldn't look so bad. Yeah. To the meteorologists there, since they're engaged in a non-scientific endeavor, a non-reliable endeavor like many other people, but one that's blatantly before the public's eye, since in the world of commerce and television and newsprint, that they choose to put these people out there every hour or so making predictions upon which no one can rely, So there they sit, ordinary, sane, decent, probably bathed people, some of them clean underwear, engaged in a profession that who knows where it would show up on a list of inside the public's, if we surveyed the public as to on whom you can depend. So there they sit. Imagine that you're a meteorologist and you went through all that time to go to school, and in a sense, as far as anything reliable, you're sort of a laughing stock. So the man tells a little story, that one-liner that, hey, you know why God made economists? So that, comparably speaking, in comparison to us, we wouldn't look so bad. But then if you took just some guy on the street who was staying in a bar someplace outside the meteorologist, you understand there is, without any effort, that can be made to sound quite aggressive to both parties. Just some comedian could just say, hey, you know why we have economists? You know why God made economists? Kind of sneer at that, because everybody knows economists. It would be a toss-up about who is the most unreliable. And there they sit, probably making better money, more expensive suits, government positions, cabinet rank. Say, you know why God made economists? And you go, why? So that meteorologists wouldn't look quite so bad. And you go, ha ha, because both of them are just clowns, right? So there you are. And with the first group, you could look at it as being a kind of healing process. It might not be a big, you might not at first think it was a big deal, but imagine that if in that position, that you were a meteorologist, now you sit, and I'm sure at one of their conventions, that is a lot of what they go through, is worrying about PR and the bad image they have. It's not uncommon, as you people in other professions would know, that everything from the law to medicine, any profession, they get together for those kind of professional conventions. And that is nowadays one of these subjects always. There'll be one of the featured speakers will be on the basis of how can we improve our image with the public. So put yourself right quick in the position of a meteorologist. All that time spent, and still every year somebody, some little small station out in Des Moines will find a guy with a cow that can predict the weather by the switch of his tail. They continue, every year they get harder, something to do. And sure enough, the cow, by the switch of his tail, by the farmer's interpretation, it's just a guy standing there in overalls with a 5th grade education, and the station goes out there for like a week in a row or 2 weeks in a row to give it a fair shot, and they check with the National Weather Service with all the satellites and all. And this farmer, every day he says, well, according to Bessie, and only he's interpreting. He said, according to Bessie, it will rain within the next 24 hours. The next 48 hours will be dry. And the cow beats the Weather Service year in and year out. But by the same token, they take some drunk or some 5-year-old kid and give him a dartboard, and they give him some kind of chart they make up, or the stock exchange, the stock of every day, and he throws darts, and they drop some kind of chart, and he just selects stock on that basis. I'm getting around to economists, and he has better success than guys up there making $500,000 a year, brokers, economic forecasters, guys with their own column in the paper, serious people. And a kid with his eyes closed throws darts, and he does just as good, if not better. So we all know that. That's just life. But now imagine that you were in the position of the meteorologist and you're seeing there. It is a kind of healing. Although, as I said, you might not have made a great deal out of it, but that would have been a nice touch for the featured speaker, or maybe one of the opening speakers. Say hello, and what a nice place we have here in Las Vegas or Miami Beach. Oh, by the way, here's one, maybe you hadn't. Why did God make economists? So that we'd have something in comparison to which someone that we wouldn't look so bad. And there'd be a nice little laughter. Ha, ha, ha. It is really a kind of healing. This does not operate in humor in any widespread mainstream manner. Because if we were going to make any sort of ad hoc rule regarding humor, what you've already heard around here is that an ordinary humor, sans its aggression, without its hostility, is really not humorous. And it's not just the joke itself, it's not just the line, it is, again, the tango. The complexity of seeing that the life itself is arranged in such a way that some things are heard in a hostile manner, in an aggressive manner. So it's not the in particular joke's hostile, but we've been through this before, but you can take any joke you want to. If it was a challenge, I could do it, but you could surely do it yourself. Just any joke that you ever heard. And get to the punchline, and if you extract the aggression, it's not hard to find. It doesn't have to be an absolute, it doesn't have to be a racial or a religious joke, it doesn't have to be a sexist joke that's just a direct slap at somebody in the punchline. But if you look at the joke, just a couple of lines, a setup, no, and then the punchline, and you look at it and think, all right, I can see that there's some aggression. At first you might not thought about it. If you take the aggression out, you might just be one word. Normally we'll do it on a short joke, you just take one word out. You've taken out the aggression, but the joke is not funny. I mean, not even at the level it was. Well, one of the oldest vaudevillian Western jokes is, who was that lady I saw you with last night? That was no lady, that was my wife. People in the Borscht Belt and low-class clubs that we won't name still get laughs for that. And all you got to do is you look at the aggression. And you think, well, the man's taking a slap at his wife. Or nowadays you'd say he's taking a slap at women. That's all you got to do. Hey, who's that lady I saw you with last night? That was my wife. Yeah. All you got to do is just fool around with the words. If you take out the aggression, it's not funny. There has to be a kind of aggression. I say aggression, I could say something else. It's always based upon the polarized necessity for a three-dimensional world to operate, not excluding language. But aggression is as fine a word as any. It is as descriptive as any other you could come up with. So why is not humor used in a more healing manner, as witnessed by my opening example? Why is there not humor that is healing? Humor that is comforting? Then you would be a short step away from trying to answer that question that you heard presented here some time back, and I notice no one is yet to claim the prize, is why is there no religion based on humor? Is religion based apparently on everything else? I mean, just almost everything else. Humor based upon one man who says he's from Venus, or men who say that they're worshiping past men who died and came back to life. There's religion based on almost anything. There's religion based on blatant hostility and aggression. There's religion based on sexism, racism, national pride, money. Just about anything you could name, you can find some group somewhere that the religion is based on some activity that can be described in one word or less of human activity except humor. Looked at another way, to extract it, the personalized, you just say, why is there no humor in religion? Why is it not funny? Now I know you can make jokes about religion, but again it's got to be aggressive. It has to be hostile toward some religion or whatever the context of the joke is. What I'm saying is, why is there no comforting humor in religion? Why is there in other words, no ordinary humor? We're leaving that out. But that notwithstanding, why is there no humor running through religion? There's grief, there's sorrow, there's pity, there's fear, plenty of aggression. If you get used to your own, especially here in the West, your own holy text, I guess you get used to it, but if you want to read blood and guts, you don't have to attack TVs. Go back and read the Old Testament. If you could read it with fresh eyes. So you got religion that's filled with everything you can imagine except what? Humor. That is healing humor, non-aggressive humor. Of course, there's not even much aggressive humor in there, but unless you've got a real perverted sense of humor, which thank God some people do and can keeps religion on its toes. No, it doesn't. I just said that. Religion doesn't have to get on its toes. Religion can get on your toes. Just stand real close to the religious part of the parade when it goes by and stick out your tongue. And if you really stick out your tongue enough, religion, of course I've already pointed out, any human institution, if you stick out your tongue enough and actually begin to splatter, religion or annoy it, religion will just suddenly go, oops, and take a misstep. So, How can you tell? There's another item the other night. How can you tell? The way it was presented was that how could you tell that a mystic's lost it? And there would be two ways. Either he had been serious and had now ceased to be so, or vice versa. And there was another one that I've thrown in several times of late. That there's a version tonight somewhere. Well, the one the other night was that you cannot get anyone's attention unless you're either attacking them or in some way you are crying doom. That you are referring to the health of life. Now, there's no way you can get ordinary people's attention. But if you get an ordinary person's attention through that basis, and those of you already listening ahead, we don't have to worry about one person doing it to somebody else. It's you. It's you daydreaming. It's you redoing the thoughts that you've heard everyone else do about what is important in life, without necessarily going through that kind of literal preface each time you think. But you'd have to ask yourself a rhetorical question. It must be serious. It must be important if you're a sane person, or why would you think it? Right. So you're painted into a corner that even the paint fumes are noxious to the point of, could you be quiet about that? That was the point. If you ask yourself what it is you think about, and then you ask yourself, is it important? Your mind can only give one answer. You could only give one answer in defense of yourself. To just be minimally sane, you'd have to go, well, yes. I guess my priorities change and my agendas change from time to time. Shut up. But you ask somebody, well, a large part of your life, you're a sophisticated, civilized person. You're not there living in the jungle, and you're up to date person. So a large part of your life is engaged in thought. Yes, it is. Pondering, reflection. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Musing even sometimes. Do you ponder, ruminate, reflect on, muse about frivolous matters? I mean, we all do a little, but insofar as you actually applying your mind in some specific manner. Do you ever do so on matters that are of really no importance? Well, certainly not. I strive not to. Well, no, you're right. I mean, my mind will wander off and daydream. I've been through that. Shut up. Just answer the damn question. Well, no, certainly I don't. What else can you say if you ask yourself? Of course, if you're my kind of person, you'd ask yourself that at home and you'd go, God damn, and you'd want to hit yourself in the jaw, except those of you who've never done it, you can hurt yourself. It's a strange thing. Man's only creature among his other unique talents that can do that. I know some people say, well, he's the only one that will do it. I like could. An elephant cannot take its trunk and hit itself in the eye or hit itself in the jaw and knock itself down. A horse can't take a hoof and hit itself in the stomach and make it double over. Only man can hurt himself. Were you just talking physically? He's getting better. Yes, physically to start with. Man is the only person, which is why I said don't try it, but you would be well within your rights if you had been sitting at home alone and took that question home and thought, all right, do I ever, using my mind, my best way, I'm pretty, read a lot, thought a lot, meditated a lot, but now that you put it that way, do I ever actually use my mind when I'm watching what I'm doing, not just daydreaming? We've been through that. All right, when you're sitting there and really reading or thinking about something, got a problem, do you ever actually use your mind? That you're trying to use your mind, yeah, on some matter that's not important. It's almost shameful to answer the question. Most people, they're going to go, oh, it's a trick or something. I'm not even going to answer that. I mean, to answer it shows that you've got less than a sterling mind, right? Because it's just, nobody can answer. Well, yes, I sit around and sometimes I'll set aside. I'll go off for a weekend to retreat, and I'll go off and sit down and I'll fast perhaps, and I'll cleanse my body. I'll do without sex. I don't want to go into that. I'll get myself in that kind of position. I'll wrap myself in a warm Indian kind of blanket, one of those I brought up to the reservation in Chattanooga, and I'll sit there, and I'll get myself in the right mood, and maybe I'll get up just before sunrise, and I'll sit up on a high mountain, and as the sun comes up, I'll begin to ponder, why can't they ever get a third football league actually off the ground and in operation over 2 years? And I'll spend all weekend doing it. Certainly not. It seems silly. First one I thought about. And people would not even want to answer it, which is another question you might consider, is why the ordinary mind, yours, not just other people. It just sounds like we're talking about other people. But why would not even anybody want to answer that? That is the question, to say, would you ever take your mind when you're just at your best, when you're not just daydreaming, and actually sit down and reflect upon, muse upon, and all that stuff on some matter that's just frivolous? Your mind doesn't really want to answer it. You know, it's just yucky. You don't want to answer, because to answer it, you're almost admitting that your mind, that this is a possibility. So everything that you think about when you're actually thinking, not daydreaming, everything you think about is of some serious nature. Now, everybody needs a few time out. You don't work 8 hours a day, so let's get that over with. Yeah, you daydream. So look at that as your rec time for the mind. But 8 hours a day you must work, right? Physically, so 8 hours a day, or some period of time. Anybody who lays claim to being not just an intellectual, but being a civilized, sophisticated, modern person. Once asked, just check with your own mind, would have to say, well, I do, or at least I do not spend my time, my best quality time with my mind. I do not spend it on frivolous matters, like sports or whatever. You're right, I don't.
No.
And of course that is what do they call it? A bloody lie.
Yeah.
That's worse than a lie. It just shows you're ordinary. It just shows you're deranged. It shows you got no more idea what's going on with the human nervous system up here than you do down there. All right, over there. For those of you who consider yourself professional sex perverts, trying to weasel your way out. So the human mind operating at the best, we're not laughing. Remember, this is not aggression at ordinary people, but individuals and humanity as a whole, civilized humanity, the universities. You understand? The intellectual aspect of life, the intelligentsia of life, the collective, does not spend its time on frivolous matters. Forget whether it does or not. It does not. It cannot. You cannot ask. They do not give Nobel Prizes or Pulitzer Prizes for silliness. They do not award a Nobel Prize in physics every year for who came up with the greatest new development in the bladder bag. Or the newest improvement in the joy buzzer, or the whoopee cushion. They do not award, I know it's almost as silly, they give out Nobel Prizes in economics, which is staggering, but they don't give it out, in improvement in joke production, or they don't give it in new theoretical models of professional sports. And that's in serious matters. That's just, people do not even analyze it. It doesn't seem open to question. It just seems silly. And of course it's not. I'm saying of course in case there's anybody in here that understands what of course means. Of course means reality. It means that in some way you've turned around and looked right at that blank wall and you thought, my God, that's better than a mirror. Because it's, what's his name? That's right, you. You do not think of anything serious. If you did, you don't know how to do it anyway, because if you thought of something serious, if you've been pondering on it and you had any ability to think, then I'd say, well, how long have you been pondering this? And again, this would pass for being even greater ammunition to your claim of being an intellectual. You'd go, well, I am not a Freddie come lately. That's Johnny. Okay, well, I'm not a Johnny come lately in this matter. You look more like a Fred. Okay, I'm not a Fred come lately in this matter, because I know that many people are concerned over the injustice of the world. But hey, I've been studying this matter, trying to figure out why there is inequality in just the visible parts of humanity. And I didn't start yesterday. I mean, this is no fad with me. I've been doing this since I can remember. I wrote an essay back in the 10th grade. that sounds as though it is further support for one's intellectual seriousness. Except for this, what kind of mind is that? How old are you? 40? Yeah? All right, so you've had what? 35, 40? 25 years you've been thinking on this problem. No. Well, beat me with an improved bladder bag if you're not the smartest man I ever met. Been thinking about it 25 years. Didn't just start. No, sirree. Didn't just start. I mean, you didn't just yesterday think of it for the first time and think, I'll go think about that. Oh, no, 25 years. And the answer is, well, I don't know. I'm working on it. That is serious, is it not? Unless you caught the beginning of this from another view, it is not serious. There is no healing in that. The most you can make out of it, you're laughing now. If I'd done that with an ordinary audience, they would hear it as aggressive. I was even playing it that way. This guy says, well, I have been thinking serious things, and as proof of it, I've been doing it. And I was trying to point my proof that people do not think about serious things. And I say, all right, let's assume they do. Let this guy slide. And I say, do you think about serious things? He goes, yes. And he even gives me the example of the injustice of life. And I go, okay, that sounds serious. You consider that serious? The world does. He says, yes, I do. And I say, all right, how long have you been thinking about this? Doing this serious pondering? And he says, 25 years, more or less. And then it sounds, I'm sure ordinary people would have heard it, as aggressive humor for me to go, well, beat me with an improved bladder bag. That proves, boy, how sharp you are. Been thinking about it 25 years. And you said you've come to what conclusion? Well, none yet. What is the relationship, if any, between ordinary conceptions of urgent seriousness and understanding? Do you mean besides none? Did that sound aggressive? Did you hear that as aggressive? Well, certainly you would, except for this. Unless you're an absolute walking around ordinary person, you understand that that is not aggressive. That was a very simple, brief, abrupt, to the point. A very pithy limning of reality. He came to no conclusion. He will never come to a conclusion. The matters that people take seriously will never come to a conclusion. And they hear, if it was ever pointed out, which only a fool would get up, another ordinary person sticking out his tongue at the parade, which is supposed to be us talking, we're not talking to life. They would hear it as criticism, they would hear it as aggression, whereas it's not. When you're confronted with that which the mind does not like, it has its own response that is not dissimilar to the body. When the body is fed poison, when the body accidentally takes poison, it will regurgitate it. The mind, in the same way, when it finds that which it cannot accept, it will, in an aggressive manner. And sometimes it can use humor, and other times it can use the patina of sophistication and education. That is, by saying, well, yes, I'm stupid, but that shows how smart I am. Or yes, I don't understand anything about injustice, and that was my specialty. I don't know what college you went to. I majored in injustice. Philosophy. I majored in that, in ethics. And you're up for a Pulitzer Prize, yes, or Nobel Prize, yes. Maybe your own engraved matches, yes. And you've come to what conclusion? Proud to say, none. Work on it every day. Go off to retreats. I lead retreats at times. Not only go myself, I now lead retreats. And if I try to say, you lead retreats to get others, they pay money and they show up for you to help them, not to come to any conclusion, not knowing more than they knew. An ordinary, sane, educated person could only take that as being what? Hostile, aggressive. It is not healing, because if they cannot see it, if a man, you understand the justice one more time, if an ordinary person does that, a hostile comedian, they can ignore it. Well, they can ignore it anyway, no matter who does it. What I'm saying is, if that sort of thing that appears to be social criticism, which there was one in there tonight that I noticed only got a small reaction, that said that all satire is social criticism, and all social criticism is excessive amounts of hog sweat. They would hear it as being social criticism. They would hear it specifically if we're using this imaginary person who is a professor and ethics. They would hear it as a direct slap, in the same way that the economist standing outside the door at the meteorological convention would hear that opening speaker's remark about why did God make economists. Outside, he would not hear it as a kind of healing, softening opening statement amongst meteorologists. If an economist was walking past that door and having to stop and listen, he would hear that as aggression. He would take, you know what, the big M, the big U. How do you spell umbrage around here? The big E. New Orleans, exception. You cannot get ordinary people's attention. You cannot hold it. A little more obtuse tonight, if I pulled it out, was it, if you do not pick on, it had to do with, I didn't give much of a preface, but I could have set it up as being some combination between zoology, physical territorial imperative drive, and the unrecognized intellectual realm of man, something like that. And then pointed out, using all those tied up, that if you do not pick on the weak wolves and the feeble minds, that's two different things, they're not inclined to stick around, which has to do with the physical dance amongst all creatures, including man, even someone named Freddie, and the intellectual aspect. It does not just take an alpha male wolf, remember, to start a pack. Who's it going to lead? So you got to have someone who'll dance backwards. You got to have someone who'll tango with him. And he's got to have more than one, because two a pack do not make. So he's got to have those that will submit. And to varying degrees, they have got to be weaker than he is. The weaker they are, the more they must be picked on, in case you don't know that. In case zoology has never noticed that, I'll go ahead and tell you now. You can come up with an extra point next time you take a zoology quiz. Right. That when you have, let's say, a group of, there could be wolves, all sorts, any pack, any pack animal. Whoever it is, if you had whatever the number is, X amount, you can have them to varying degrees. Because when you've got a leader of the pack, you've got an alpha male wolf, as they call it, I'm using it in the widest possible sense, as you know by now, if that's a usable term, he will constantly, if the pack itself, a herd, a collective, if the herd, pack, collective itself is healthy, then it will not be just one alpha male wolf. He will be constantly having to fend off attacks from two or three others. They're always fighting for it. So after that, then you've got the pack itself, the majority, and they just submit. But there's also something else that they never take into account. Getting down that kind of hierarchy, the weaker they get, the more feeble you get down to the animals, the more the alpha wolf must pick on them or they won't even stick around. I threw in an item several nights ago. No one reacted to it. Surprise. You would think that the weak, which right quick, there's an item in here that I never wrote down, that the weak's attitude, in the full sense of the word, the weak's attitude toward the heroic is twofold. And you would think that, and there is evidence for it, undisputable evidence, that it is the weak who are the supporters of the heroic myths. It is the weak who would go to the movies and watch Superman. Not totally, of course, that's all the audience, but you would think, with good reason, you would surmise to begin with that it is the heroic stories of knights, supermen, gods, godlike people, that it would be the weak who would most admire it. Because you might think, well, if there's some guy that was damn close to being Superman, or if we're talking about something a little more down to earth, a strong leader, a general, a well-known warrior in some place, if there was some other warriors. In other words, we looked at him as being, in a sense, an alpha wolf. And there were others that were very close to it. You would think, well, they're not going to find him all that heroic. They want to kick his ass. They want to cut him down and kill him and take his place. They will still show up at the movie about his life. They will still read the book. The twofold is the weak's attitude toward the heroic the only one that people ever notice is that, yes, they are the supporters. They're the ones that, a book on King Arthur, just make up, on the Knights of the Round Table, I could get ordinary people to agree if I said we have done statistical checking now through the barcodes and all that kind of stuff, and nowadays, and we have people fill out forms, we won't send them the book. At any rate, it's a known fact now, or it is known, we got the info, we got the statistics, better than info, that shows that over 87.5% of the people who buy books on King Arthur or anything doing with chivalry are undernourished, they're underweight, and by their own admission, we ask them to check off, do you consider yourself brave, heroic, shy, all the way down to skittish, weak, frightened, and it is those at the bottom of the list who most like it. They are the big buyers. People would go, I never thought about that. Nobody would dispute that. They go, okay. But that's not all. That's not all that's involved. I said it was twofold, so there's got to be two, don't they? No, I lied. Good night. All right, there it is. There's another way to look at it. Is the weak having two brains like everyone else? Doesn't matter whether you got two weak hemispheres. You can have two weak hemispheres. You can have two strong hemispheres. You can say, every time I go to the beach, somebody kicks sand in my hemisphere. One of them. Only one. Because the other one says, boy, if you weren't looking and turned your back, I'd beat the shit out of you or hit you with a rock. And the guy turns around and says, did somebody's hemisphere say something? And you go, not me, kick some more sand. The weak, you've got to get very allegorical now. Either that or out of town. Or out of your mind. The weak, not only that one aspect, are the supporters that you would think with some credence, some basis for such a belief that it would be, once it's pointed out or asked, that the weak's attitude toward the heroic in story, myth, song, their imagination is one of admiration, that they would be the supporters, they would be the readers, the consumers of the heroic myths. There's also something else. They do not like the heroic. Like's not the word because they don't think about it, and it's not a describable passion. They want to be kicked. Back to where we were. Even zoology doesn't know this, but the further you get down the pecking order, the further you get down the hierarchy, the alpha wolf, and now you can forget wolves, you can remember the nexus that is the forces that run life. We're not talking about people, individuals. We're not talking about, at least we're not talking about knowledgeable people consciously involved with something, nor are we talking about wolves or sheep or chickens or cows. But the further you are away from what is the local seat of power, which would be an alpha wolf, the further you get down there, if the seat of power does not specifically, the weaker they are, if it doesn't pick on them, they won't stick around. You've got to pick, that's the ones you got to pick on the most. The seat of power, now we've got to go back and forth very quick from the using what it sounds to be actual stories, physical examples like the alpha wolves and the packs. You would think, well, hey, the alpha wolf, whoever's running the herd now, whichever is the alpha chimp in some chimpanzee troop, he's got to spend most of his time fighting off. There's 3 or 4 males here, beta males or whatever the hell they would call them, pretenders to the throne. He spends most of his time, if he ain't screwing, he's having to fight off these guys that want to take over his women and take over his place. That's what they sit around, I'm sure, and observe time-wise. That, boy, he spends X amount, which is probably a goodly part of his time, having to be on the lookout. But he does something else that zoologists, not because they're fault, just because of the human mind, consciousness, they have never noticed. He also, forget just time, because I'm not questioning, they can sit there with stopwatches. They got nothing better, you know what it takes to be famous, get a degree. They're sitting out there in the bushes with the tsetse flies, for a year, clocking how often that alpha male engages in, I always like, they say things like the chimpanzees making love. That takes some stretch. That's almost as bad as saying, a couple in Mississippi in a trailer park making love. At any rate, they have to come up with all these statistics. 2 years out in the jungle, that so many hours on the average per week, the alpha male is engaged in making love, and then so many hours he's engaged in foraging for food, and so many that he is fighting off the pretenders to his position. I'm not questioning. I have no doubt that they have to. They have to be pretty factual because a graduate student will come back along and tear up his work if he doesn't, overturn his work. No, rescind his degree. So I'm not questioning that. He actually says, well, he spends so much time, and there'll be nothing listed about going around picking on. If he included all, it'd be just like, 1 minute a week is one of the feeble chimpanzees. He's walking over toward a woman or toward the food, and there's some weak one, way down, just almost a nothing. And just to get out of the way soon enough, the alpha male may do that. I mean, it's 1 second out of a week, because the rest of the time they get out of the way. They don't ever notice it. But what they do not notice is the alpha male, that is the source of local power in that community. And now we're back to allegory. It must spend a great deal of time picking on the weakest, sending out aggressive energy toward the weakest, or the weakest won't stick around. You can't have a universe, you can't have a solar system with just a center. All that great poetic stuff in the 20th century of wartime allegory poetry of the center's about the center will not hold, the center will give way. It's screw the center. It's all things have always got a center, but you do not have local conditions. Life has not set up local conditions unless you've got the fringes. Getting an alpha wolf, getting don't you know the one about, it was a poetic version about the defenses within a war was falling apart, and the general in a poetic way says, if I do not get help, if we don't do something, the center cannot hold. That is, that's the general. Supposedly, it's a poet writing all this, that he's there like, if I don't get help, the center will not hold. That attitude is, well, hey, they can kill all the troops, they can kill all the foot soldiers, the infantry, but hey, we're talking about the brains of the outfit. If I don't get some help and some protection, the center won't hold. The tacit rest of it being, if the center gives way, it all gives way. I got news for you. If you can see on a higher level, that's never the problem. If that center gives way, life will be all choked up. There'll be one right next door a split second later. It's the fringes. It is the weak ones. If you do not have a perimeter, if you do not have the moon, screw the sun. The ordinary mind cannot see that. The mind would say to take the solar system, jumping from wolves and wars to the solar system itself, our local conditions. People would say, well, wait a minute. Are you saying the sun, what's the most important in the solar system? Everybody would say the sun. They can say that all they want to. The alpha wolf. You ask people, who is the most important member of a tribe, of a chimpanzee troop, of a wolf pack? And they say, well, the alpha wolf. I mean, whether you like it or not, he's the most important. But you've got no center. You've got no sun without the moon. You've got no sun without the furthest, whatever it is, Pluto's furthest out moon. Never mind that the center won't hold. Life always comes up with a center, but it's the fringes won't hold. It's therefore the weak must be picked on. Now guess where this is going? It's almost over. Your own mind. Who gets picked on? What you call serious. And you don't even notice how you pick on it. You call it thinking about it and reflecting on it. You're picking on a cripple. You're picking on a weak. You're picking on the weakest baboon in the whole pack. I mean, that's the ordinary center of an ordinary person. That's the center of their power. I think a lot. I reflect a lot. By God, you may laugh at it, but shit, sometimes I come close to actually musing. About what? And they'll tell you something important, but you know what they're going to tell you without knowing it? They're kicking around the weakest part of their tribe, which is who? Can you spell Y-O-U on the bottom of your shoe? Well, we didn't get around to seriousness and more aspects of the connection, but I mean, what can I tell you? It was just a joke anyway. No, it wasn't. No. I don't upset you.